in Damascus always has its own way of being calm. The fading call to prayer, shop lights dimming, and the aroma of black coffee wafting gently from narrow alleys. 5 Israeli fighter jets breached Syrian airspace from the south. No warning, no compromise. Seconds later, the sky over Saweda lit up red. The first explosion struck a military base, followed by 3 more salvos, all precise, brutal, and deadly. In a nearby town, an 8-year-old boy woke to the sound of shattering glass. He cried out for his mother, who ran outside only to see their neighbor's home had become a crater of fire. Israel called it a preemptive operation, a preventive strike. The target? A facility allegedly serving as a logistics hub for Druze militias clashing with Bedouin tribes. But the ones hit were a school, a market, and an apartment block. "Blood on the streets," said one witness. "Lifeless bodies, children, women, soldiers, all together." Amateur cameras captured the flames, the screams of civilians, and ambulances delayed by debris-choked roads. On social media, the world watched hell unfold in real time. Israel claimed the strike was for their security, to prevent sectarian conflict from spilling into the Golan Heights. But for the Syrian people, nothing could justify the death of 20 souls, most of whom had never touched a weapon. All they held were shopping bags, dolls, or the Quran. One night, 5 minutes, 20 lives, and this was what sparked it all. The sky over Damascus was still clouded with smoke as dawn broke, but fury had already ignited on the ground. Hospitals were overwhelmed, state media scrolled through the names of the dead, and people began to flood the streets with a single demand: retaliate! In the basement of Syria's Ministry of Defense, the generals didn't take long. No long speeches, no cross-party meetings, just maps, coordinates, and launch codes. Target the Golan. Golan 2 missiles. Send a message, said Brigadier General Mahdi, his voice colder than the concrete beneath his boots. At 11:43 a.m., the world witnessed something that hadn't happened since the 1973 war. Syria, long known only for enduring, finally struck back. Locally produced medium-range missiles were launched from the country's southern region. The sky roared once again. Targets: the Golan Heights and Israel's Defense Administration hub in Tel Aviv. One missile was believed to have pierced Israel's famously impenetrable defense system. Sirens blared across Tel Aviv. Civilians rushed into underground bunkers. Offices were evacuated. And then, the explosion. Not far from the Syria district, the heart of Israel's military and defense ministry, black smoke billowed into the air. Surrounding buildings were destroyed. The wail of ambulances and the thrum of helicopters engulfed the city. Israeli media stated only, "An attack has occurred. The situation is being handled." But leaked group chats told a different story. A high-ranking official may have been killed. Was it true? The world didn't know yet, but the impact was immediate. "This isn't just a missile," wrote one Turkish analyst. "It's a blunt warning. Syria is no longer playing defense." In Damascus, crowds erupted in cheers. They knew what was at stake, but after years of being the target, they were finally seeing something else. A cost being paid by Israel. Tel Aviv burned, not with fire, but with fear. And in the skies, the storm hadn't passed. Tel Aviv never truly sleeps. But that night, the usually vibrant metropolis full of lights and music was drowned by sirens, screams, and prayers. Syria's retaliatory strike hit deeper than anyone had imagined. Explosions shook the military district, leaving a massive crater in the heart of the city. Windows shattered within a 1-kilometer radius. Dozens of vehicles burned to ashes. And the most painful of all, several bodies were evacuated with their faces covered by the blue and white flag. Official media only referred to key casualties. But wild rumors quickly spread. A defense minister, possibly killed. The Israeli people panicked. Not because of war, they had grown used to living in its shadow, but because they knew, this time, their longtime enemy had breached the very core of their defenses. Chaos erupted in parliament. Opposition members shouted at the prime minister, "You dragged us into this war unprepared. We need allies, not unilateral attacks. Where is the Iron Dome system you bragged about?" The prime minister stood at the podium, face tense. He was speaking not just to parliament, but to the world, to his people, to his enemy. "We have been attacked. We will retaliate, but we will not rush. We will calculate and strike with deadly precision." Outside the parliament building, the people needed no rhetoric. They needed assurance. Bunkers were full. Roads out of the city jammed. Supermarkets ran out of supplies within hours. Schools closed. Airports shut down. For the first time in a decade, Tel Aviv experienced a full curfew. A mother in Haifa wrote on social media, "My child has never slept in such silence. But tonight, he can't sleep because he's afraid." In the international media, questions began to echo. Is Israel in its weakest position in the last 20 years? Has Syria just redrawn the regional balance of power? There were no bombs that night, but the ticking of the clock felt far more terrifying. Because everyone knew, silence is not peace. Silence is a countdown. What started as a minor border conflict has now captured global attention. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session filled with tension and accusations. At the Green Table in New York, voices clashed. Russia condemned the illegal Israeli aggression, calling the strikes a dangerous Western provocation. Iran, quietly backing Syria, declared its readiness to support the resistance by all means. The United States, Israel's steadfast ally, called for restraint and diplomatic dialogue, while affirming Israel's right to self-defense. Meanwhile, Turkey and Egypt called for an independent investigation into civilian casualties and urged all parties to exercise restraint. On social media and television, the news went viral under conflicting headlines. In the West, many condemned Israel's strikes as human rights violations. In the Middle East, calls for solidarity grew louder for the Syrian people who suffered. Influencers, activists, and even celebrities spoke out. Hashtags #PrayForSyria and #StandWithIsrael dominated global trends. Geopolitical analysts revealed this conflict as a symbol of the long-simmering regional power struggle between the US and Russia, Israel and Iran, and allies scattered across the globe. Amid the online debates and clashes, ordinary people in Damascus, Tel Aviv, and other cities felt trapped in a grand game. They asked, "When will this end?" And more fearfully, "Are we on the brink of a major war?" The skies over the Middle East remain smoky, but the storm on the world stage is beginning to bare its teeth. After 2 tense days, a sudden ceasefire was announced. From Damascus to Tel Aviv, weapons fell silent. Yet this quiet felt like a pause before the storm. On the streets of Damascus, residents embraced, exhausted but relieved. Yet behind those smiles, many knew. Wounds ran deep, and the thirst for revenge had not faded. In Tel Aviv, lights flickered back on, schools slowly reopened, and the bustle of life returned. But beneath it all, fear lingered. Parents wiped sweat from their children's foreheads, wondering when the nightmare might return. Diplomats at the UN returned to the negotiating table with hope, but also caution. What seemed like the end of the conflict could flare up at any moment, especially with the great stakes involved in the Middle East. Behind the scenes, intelligence and military forces of both countries began preparations. Fighter jets were repaired, missiles upgraded, and spies kept watch day and night. Is this the end of the wave of violence, or merely the opening act of a far greater war? In a small cafe in Damascus, an old man looked up at the night sky and whispered, "The sky may burn again, but tomorrow still belongs to us."